Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, a Pittsburgh Steelers podcast made by fans like you, for fans like you. Now, here's your host, Joe Kuzma.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Steel City Underground podcast. I'm your host, Joe Kuzma, and joining me once again after a very long hiatus, my number two, I guess I could call you my sidekick since you call me the supreme leader, Eric Herrmann. How are you doing, Eric?
I'm good, Joe. How are you?
You know how I am. My banking information had been stolen. I've had a problem with viruses on my computer. I had to wipe everything out. A little bit of a delay in trying to get this podcast out, and I'm going crazy, man. I'm going crazy. The weather, one day it's 60 degrees. The next day it's like a blizzard. I don't know what's going on out there, man.
I know. I think it was Wednesday night. It was like 50 degrees in the morning, and then I went outside at like 10 o'clock at night, and it was snowing, and it was the worst thing.
It made me think of, and I'm going to misquote this because I always misquote movies, but the original Ghostbusters, and Bill Murray says something like cats and dogs living together, mass hysteria, and that's what it feels like. So, yeah, I'm miserable. I'm also coming down with a sore throat here, so it's just like I'm just getting hit from every angle. And to make matters probably worse, of course, you know what? I'm going to give a little more of an introduction for those who don't follow Eric out there in the Twitterverse and the interwebs. His Twitter handle is Steelers Grind, and he's a contributor and associate editor here at Steel City Underground, always putting out quality content. And as such, me and Eric put our minds together back in, let me see when this was published. This was back on June 2nd of last year. Oh. Yeah.
Wow. I thought it was going to be like August. Wow, it's June.
No, this was June, and it was the way too early Steelers predictions, and this was the offense edition. So we're going to come back around and do the defensive one as well in another episode of this podcast. But this is kind of funny. Most people, they like, well, you know what? I like to brag, so I'm hoping I got a few of these right. Just a spoiler, I did not read this since June. So this is going to come off genuine as a surprise. I did not prep for this at all. All I had is the link up for the website. So this is going to be interesting to see just what we got right and what we got wrong. And hopefully I do have a few things I can brag about. Or otherwise, you know what? Nobody else does this. I mean, I wish Skip Bayless would go back and see how idiotic he's been with a lot of the comments and the predictions that he's made. It's just you gotta love Skip, but just like anybody, anybody doing this, you're probably gonna be wrong more often than you're right. I had a good tear with some of the bold predictions, but let's take a look and see what we had. We had a number of categories that we put out here. We said the biggest addition for the Steelers, and of course on the offense, there was really only one guy to pick, and we said it was Ladarius Green. I don't know that it ended up panning out quite the way we envisioned.
Yeah, I mean, he really was the biggest addition, and it's not really his fault. He got hurt. He has that ankle injury he dealt with really early on. Then when he finally was coming along and actually contributing, he got concussed. So it kind of just a sucky situation for everybody.
Yeah, I don't know. It's really tough to say that anybody was the biggest addition. I mean, everybody pretty much carried over from the previous year. Even Jesse James, Ladarius Green was the only free agent that was really of any note that was signed. I mean, he was the biggest name. He struggled to get on the field. Then he had the concussion at the end of the year. I mean, Eli Rogers was it was his first full year, so I guess he kind of fits in as the biggest addition on the offensive side of the ball, at least.
He was on the roster, though. I wouldn't really count him.
Yeah, I mean, but who else is there? There's maybe Kobe Hamilton, and people are...
maybe Ayers. Since he...
Yeah.
I'm an advocate for Ayers. I wrote one film room all year, and that was on DeMarcus Ayers. On Christmas Day. I thought he played great.
Yeah, and you know what? That's like really, he played 2 games. He played 3. He played Christmas against the Ravens, and then he played a week later on New Year's against the Browns, and then he got like a catch or 2 against the Dolphins, And then he just disappeared. He wasn't even active in the AFC Championship game. But you know what? I'm a big DeMarcus Ayers fan too. You know what? He also just followed Steel City Underground. So I'm actually
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
Nice.
I'm actually a little afraid to say anything about him because maybe he'll unfollow and we're going to make an enemy. But no, we love you, DeMarcus. If you, for whatever crazy reason, it's the off season, maybe you listen in or something like that, give us a shout out. Totally appreciate the follow. But we like all these guys. I hope Ladarius can bounce back and be the guy that we were expecting, but that didn't quite pan out. And like I said, that was it's almost like a whimper already with the biggest addition. But we did have a few, and well, your picks were kind of interesting for overachiever.
So I took Darius Hayward-Bay as my overachiever, and I'm not even sure what to say about his season. I don't know. Was he hurt a lot of the season? Because he really didn't do anything.
No, he was hurt for a little bit of time. I guess his most memorable play, he had a couple. He was like Landry Jones's right-hand guy, that New England Patriots game that was playing at Heinz Field. He had a touchdown. He had another one that was called back. He had the big run against the Dolphins. It was the only thing memorable in that game. And then, of course, he scampered back for what was the play? I'm trying to think. Oh, that was the Patriots game as well, wasn't it? Where he ran back and forced the fumble, and Landry Jones recovered it in the back of the end zone.
Oh, that was the Browns game.
Oh, it was Browns game. That's right. I'm thinking like Landry Jones. I keep forgetting that Landry played in that last game, and I don't know why. But yeah, that game was insane, and that's like the play of the year for Darius Hayward-Bay. But I think
for sure.
The reason we had Darius, and the reason we're saying that Hay-Bay here was an overachiever, you got to remember back in June is we're still looking for answers for Martavis Bryant and him being suspended. The news coming out maybe a month or two beforehand, and a lot of people feel that maybe Sammy Coates was going to jump right in. I thought it was actually going to be Alejandro Villanueva. And I just said basically he went from fighting for a roster spot to starting 10 games the previous season. If he becomes a 10-game starter and protects Big Ben, he will have surpassed any expectations that would be made of him. And you know what? He ended up doing just that. So ding, 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 winner, winner, chicken dinner. I nailed one there, buddy. But yeah, I mean, as far as the overachiever, I even hate saying words like that, overachiever, underachiever. We're looking at it maybe statistically or what people may have expected. I think Big Al really did. He's probably better than anyone would have expected, especially considering the other guys on that offensive line.
Oh yeah, like considering his origin story was, well, supposedly Tomlin looked across the field during an Eagles game, saw a giant human being, wondered who he was, and wanted him. And then he turned him into an offensive lineman. That's just a crazy story. And then Kelvin Beachum gets hurt. Villanueva's our only backup, and everyone's worried. Then he comes out, plays pretty well. And then when he finally has a full season to actually actually be ready to be a starter and gel with our offensive line, he showed a lot of improvement, which is really crazy considering he's already, 28 or so at this point, and usually players at that age are kind of at their peak for the most part. So yeah, he's definitely overachieved for how a player with his situation should have played.
I mean, he wasn't even an offensive lineman. He was like a wide receiver, a tight end, and then the Eagles were trying to make him into a defensive end. And that's when I first heard about him too, because it was, hey, there's this guy that just came back from three tours in Afghanistan. He's an Army Ranger. He's trying out for the NFL, and it was like one of those feel-good stories. They're giving him a shot, and like when you first met me and you said, "Oh, look at that giant over there." It's just a crazy story, and it's one of these things where the futures contracts, one of those situations where it really worked out. They were able to get him for under contract for 2 years. He's going to be exclusive rights free agent, expected to re-sign again. Because of that exclusive rights deal, he'll also still be a bargain for a left tackle. Then you're probably going to have to pay him some major money because he's proven to be a very solid guy over there on the left side. And I know they get some guys. Ryan Harris didn't necessarily compete for that position last year like anyone had expected. Gerald Hawkins has been drafted as maybe a guy that could be a swing tackle and maybe even take over that role just looking ahead if they don't have Villanueva in the coming years. I don't know. But, this is just one of those stories where, I mean, he went out and put on like 100 pounds so he could play as an offensive lineman. And it's just a real feel-good story. If you didn't see it on SportsCenter, there was this great clip that's out. I'm trying to forget her name. I think her last name was Fox. That did the interview with him and his interpreter from Afghanistan. It's on ESPN. We had shared it multiple times on Twitter and everything else too. So go check that out if you have a chance. But the underachiever was, and this was labeled as, which offensive player will fail to live up to fans' expectations? I said D'Angelo Williams. I don't know. Yes or no. He was leading the league in rushing the first 2 games. Then they had that stinker against Philadelphia. And then Bell comes back, and D'Angelo was pretty much an afterthought the rest of the season. He had a solid game against Cleveland in that final week of the regular season. But Eric, I think you hit the guy right here. Maybe not for the same reasons as what it happened, but your pick here was solid.
Yeah, I picked Sammy Coates, and like you said, it's pretty weird because if you take the season in a vacuum and look at his playing time and the stats, I was pretty spot on. But the big picture with context is kind of a different story because when he started the season, Sammy Coates was playing a lot better than anyone expected him to be. Like, I remember people in camp were hyping him up, and even before the season, everyone was excited for him. And then what game is it? Maybe versus the Chiefs or one of those games. He just comes out and he caught like 2 touchdowns and 100+ yards. And everyone was kind of even saying at that point, like, oh, Martavis, who? We have Sammy Coates now. We don't need him. And then he was playing so well. Then news comes out about his broken fingers. And he doesn't play for a while. And then apparently his fingers are okay. But he didn't do anything at the end of the season. But then we're getting more news recently that he just had groin surgery today. So he had that injury. He had, 2 fingers had procedures worked on. One was like a tendon injury. Then he also posted on Instagram today he's getting knee surgery in a couple weeks. So it is kind of unfair to label him an underachiever because he was basically playing with no healed body parts. So it was just a strange season for Coates, and let's just hope he can heal up.
Yeah, I just joked with you offline. We just saw that, and it was kind of crazy because I asked, didn't The Walking Dead just restart like the new season? It's like this guy is Walking Dead. I mean, how many things is he going to have hurt? He just had that surgery with his hand, and then he just said he had like some type of groin surgery. Now he's going to have like a knee surgery. So get healed up and get well, Sammy. Just some of those numbers to support what you were saying. Not exactly dynamite to start the season. He nearly had 100 yards receiving just on 2 catches against the Bengals, the first home game of the year. He had 2 grabs for 97 yards, but as was kind of the knock on him coming out of the draft, 5 targets, he only catches 2. Then you're back to the 2 games on the road. He caught 2 of 3, 3 of 4. Not the biggest games. In the Kansas City game, he actually caught 8. He had 6 receptions. He was targeted 8 times, 79 yards. So he's starting to get there. He had like some oddball statistic for, I want to say like catches over 20 yards or something through like the first 5 weeks, with week 5 being the New York Jets game where he caught 6 passes for 139 yards and 2 touchdowns.
That's the game I was thinking about, yeah.
Yeah, and he was targeted 11 times, but apparently that was the game where he like lacerated his hand or broke his fingers even before halftime, and people were actually booing him at Heinz Field, which I don't get booing your own players. I mean, this isn't a city where we wear paper bags over our heads at any time. Well, I'll take that back. There are some people out there that still say, well, this wasn't a championship team. They got to get their stuff together and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, I just roll my eyes at that. It's, one of our buddies, Jim, is always saying, like, a lot of people say, oh, they're only one piece away. He doesn't really buy that. And that's true because players can be off and on, hot and cold, year to year. You could have somebody that has one good, like a freshman year and then a sophomore slump, as you would call it. So, but Sammy, he pretty much didn't play the rest of that year. I mean, the Miami game, they tried to get him in there. He had 4 targets. He was in the New England game. He had very little snaps from like that point forward. They were running on fumes because if you remember, Eli Rogers was in a walking boot at one point. This is why they had to call up Kobe Hamilton in that for that Week 6 Miami game as well, because Sammy hurts his fingers. Darius Hayward-Bay gets hurt. They don't have Martavis Bryant. Marcus Wheaton ends up on injured reserve because of his shoulder. So this wide receiver core was more like a corpse, like we were saying with Walking Dead. So it sucks to put Sammy in there, but there was a lot of competition at the beginning of the year, and we thought that might happen. So kudos to you for hitting that one. I think the hot seat on the offense, though, I'm trying to see what I had here. Oh, Marcus Wheaton actually was my hot seat pick, and I felt it was the make or break year, and unfortunately it was probably more break because he just did not get the play whatsoever. Eric, you had an interesting pick as well. I think it was one of the guys we've already mentioned.
Yeah, Alejandro Villanueva. And I mean, we already talked about him, so we don't have to get into too much, but I did kind of have him in the hot seat because we did draft Gerald Hawkins as kind of a swing tackle. Like you said, maybe he's a replacement. And because Villanueva was in this 1-year contract, it was kind of a prove-it year for him to see if he can really take this job at like full reign and be a quality starter in the NFL. And I mean, I think we both agree he did that. Even during the latter half of the season, going to the playoffs, Pro Football Focus said Steelers had the best offensive line in the NFL. Like, people used to say Villanueva was a liability, but now they say he's a quality tackle. He plays great in our line. And yeah, I think he was on the hot seat, but he proved himself.
You know, and it's because he's the left tackle. You had an entire movie dedicated to the blind side. So Big Ben is a right-handed quarterback. We don't have Michael Vick back there like we did 2 years ago. So his blind side would be from the side he's not throwing from. So he's going to turn, and anybody coming from the left, Alejandro Villanueva is the guy right there. And in fact, also on that left side is Ramon Foster, who was like ranked, what was he, like 30-something of the top 101 players graded by Pro Football Focus. He was like
32, I think.
Yeah, he was up there, and
this is ridiculous. I mean, not because he played bad, but because he's never gotten that kind of credit before, and it's about time he did.
And it's amazing that left side of the line, both guys undrafted, just street and college free agent types, and Foster certainly earned his position, and now he's considered one of the best, if not the best, left guard in the game. That's absolutely crazy. Marcus Wheaton, total of 3 games in which he was active this season. He only started in 2 of them. He caught 4 passes for 51 yards and 1 touchdown. So he disappeared and just couldn't get over whatever shoulder ailment he had all the way back from training camp, I believe. He had a problem getting on the field during the preseason. So the hot seat, we had the roster bubble, and, you know, this is kind of the interesting one, too, because I thought the player at most jeopardy of losing a roster spot was going to be David Johnson. Turns out maybe that Ladarius Green's injury helped DJ make this squad, and he was on like a 1-year deal as well. I would expect him, or maybe he did sign. Now I just drew a blank because I have to go back and look. But he certainly earned his spot and earned his keep. He even caught, I think, a 2-point conversion, and he moved the chains a few times as well. Certainly a pleasant surprise. The Steelers, once again, and I should say another injury that helped too was Roosevelt Nix couldn't get on the field for the beginning part of the season, so the Steelers needed that hybrid tight end fullback style player. So David Johnson definitely found a role with this team. Your guy was certainly interesting because I do believe you hit the nail on the head here.
Oh yeah, of course, I definitely nailed this pick because I went with Matt Spaeth, and I did a quick Google, and on July 21st, about 2 months after he posted this article, he got cut because he failed his physical. And kind of like I said in the article, I think for the position he played, Spaeth was perfect during his time in Pittsburgh. He blocked, he caught the ball when he was called upon, and he did his job. He was one of those not flashy tight ends, kind of like Heath was. He just came to work. He did his job. Didn't care about social media and all the glamour of NFL. He just did his job, and I commend you for that, Spaeth, if you happen to be listening to the Steel City Underground podcast.
I don't think he is.
I don't think so either. He probably doesn't even know what Twitter is.
Well, oh, man. You know, you're always ragging. Matt Spaeth's probably the same age or maybe even younger than I am, and you're always ragging on me about being this old man. I know what Twitter is. We know what Twitter is. I mean, just because we grew up with dial-up internet, you know what? You young kids will never know the struggle. Do you even know what a compact disc is, Eric?
I do. I used a floppy disk once back in the day.
But have you?
I know my stuff.
But did you ever have the enjoyment of having to rewind an audio cassette so you could listen to the other side, or flip it over and find whatever song that you wanted? Or our version of pirating music back in the day was using a tape recorder to record off the radio, which you wouldn't get the beginning and ends of songs because they would have ads or the DJ in them. So you will never know the struggle, my friend.
Well, I know in my car, my car is like a 2004 and it actually has a cassette player in it. So I always did one of those cassette player converters, which I have no idea how they work, but you plug them in, you can plug your phone in there. But unfortunately, my cassette player broke in my car, and I feel like it's one of those things I shouldn't bother getting fixed because it's a cassette player. So
you might not be able to you might not even get that fixed anymore. But you know what? I think I have like a spare stereo deck around here somewhere. I could ship your way. It's on you to install it. Man, you've talking about I had computer problems. You've been having car problems. So
oh yeah, I've never gotten a flat tire in my life, and I've gotten 2 in 2017 so far. So the year's going great.
Hey, you know what? If you made a New Year's resolution to learn how to change tires, I think you have already already fulfilled that obligation. So, but anyways, back to football. A little sidetrack there, but
I checked. Matt Spaeth is on Twitter, so I redact my statement about him being an old man and not knowing technology. So,
hey,
sorry, Spaeth.
I am a defender of Matt Spaeth, and yeah, we just kind of felt probably the same way. It was just the tight ends were getting a little long in the tooth. I'm sure maybe these guys felt the same way too. I guess he had an injury we weren't aware of, or maybe I just forgot about it. It was something. I don't remember what it was. I keep thinking his arm, like an elbow or tendon or shoulder. Or it is a cop-out, though, with these teams whenever they say somebody didn't pass a physical. It's like their way out. And then, of course, he retired shortly, like a day or two after that. He had this really nice, long written statement, and I believe he posted that on Twitter, if my memory serves me correctly. So, and I don't know, maybe Matt Spaeth has somebody who does Twitter for him. He could have kids or something, or a family member. Maybe he has somebody managing it. But you know what, though? He's got a Twitter presence, just like I do. And, you know, I'm telling people to follow you, too. So... So we'll do our best there, but we have sidetracked and derailed just all over the place. We have one more that was left. We had the X Factor, and we both picked wide receivers. Go ahead and reveal your marvelous X Factor pick.
Well, I picked Marcus Wheaton. I mean, we all know how that ended up. He got hurt with his shoulder and he didn't participate in training camp. Then he went to the season and it got worse or whatever, and he didn't play. But I mean, I thought my reasoning was sound for thinking Marcus Wheaton would kind of take the next step as a wide receiver. He wouldn't be kind of overshadowed by Martavis Bryant. He'd have that opportunity to step up. But I mean, sometimes it's just not your year, and Marcus Wheaton just got bad luck and got hurt. So
yeah, he was snake bitten from the beginning, and you know, that was kind of where I went, and my guy got snake bitten as well. Everybody was thinking that maybe somebody would step up, and maybe this is the problem in foresight. We're seeing this in June of last year, and then talking about the same problems around mid to the end of January with the AFC Championship is, I picked Sammy Coates, so we both went with wide receivers. We were looking for somebody else to step up alongside Antonio Brown, and it doesn't look like it happened now. You defended your pick quite well, and we talked about Wheaton. We also talked about Coates quite a bit. He's just so many injuries and things that we weren't aware of that were going on with him. And it just goes to show you when you criticize players and say you can't catch and he's a bum and get him off the field and all these other things, it's just don't say those things. Like, you know what I mean? It's like I'm not one to quickly criticize someone, especially if you know they're injured. And there's clearly a reason why he wasn't able to get on the field. I don't think this was a situation where we've had other players mentioned in the past that couldn't get on the field. Like either they didn't know the guys we've traded for, on the defense, for example. I don't want to mention his name because we mentioned it many times. Let's just say it. The initials are BB, and that's not Bill Belichick. And the things coming out of the locker room leaks and rumor mill and everything like that is these guys don't know the playbook, blah, 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 blah. But Sammy Coates was on the field to start the season. He had like a career game and then just kind of like dropped off the face of the planet. And one of these other things too is the few times they tried to do this with New England and it just didn't work out the same way. But if you recall, they got him on the field against the Indianapolis Colts. The Colts totally bit for it. I mean, Sammy wasn't going to catch, I don't know that he caught a pass in that game. I don't think he did. I think he was targeted 4 or 5 times, but that was the big game where Antonio Brown had 3 touchdowns, and it served as almost like a decoy on the other side of the field. They had to respect Sammy. They had to respect his route running and his speed, and it opened up the game for Antonio Brown on the other end to have a big game that way. So X factor, maybe not for 16 games in the postseason, but he definitely had some highs, a few blips on the radar there. So Sammy Coates, hats off to you. Well, it looks like, out of these, I think we had 6 categories. We each picked a guy for one of them, and some of them had some overlap, but I think we absolutely hit on a couple of these, and then the rest, it's like, just throw those picks in the garbage. So, but this is what you get when you're picking stuff in June, just even before like camp and everything's getting underway.
Yeah, that's why we call it way too early.
And you know what? And that's going to lead into like a lot of our draft talk that's going to be coming up. And Brian's just, we called it a mock draft insanity because it was just the craziest thing you'll see. So that's their predictions, their guesses, and that's exactly what they are. Trust me, we're not soothsayers over here. I don't have like some chicken bones in a bowl where I could figure out and predetermine someone's destiny. If I could do that, the Steelers would have won their 7th Super Bowl, and they would have been hosting that Lombardi Trophy. So, but it's cool to look back on this kind of stuff, talk about it, see what we were thinking, and see how it ended up panning out for the year. Eric, we're going to do this again here soon. So thanks for finally coming back on here, buddy.
Yeah, of course.
Don't be a stranger. And, of course, follow Eric over at Steelers Grind. You could always – his articles are up all the time. Eric's also running the Steel City Underground Awards, where we've been giving out 8 or 9 different awards to players for their performances throughout the 2016 season. And those will continue throughout this week and part of next week, and we'll end up doing a wrap-up and talking about that as well. Our entire team over at Steel City Underground made some picks. We also have the fans making some picks. So make sure you check that out. And until next time, folks, be safe, be good, and I will catch you later.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.